Well, I got all of these resources on the birth date of Jesus. Seems to be somewhat of a popular topic by skeptics to try to destroy anything to do with the Bible. The first thing you attack is Jesus and his birth date, and it wasn't correct. Luke says Quirinius, Quirinius. Had a hard time pronouncing these names. I'm not used to these kinds of words. Was governor of Syria when Jesus was born. And the skeptics say, no, he's wrong. We're going down this topic a little bit. We'll look at an inscription that archaeologists found, and other sets of archaeological artifacts. And the skeptic says, as that evidence extends through histories, local inscriptions and the papyrus returns of taxpayers in Egypt, it is immensely unlikely that a new edict of such consequence has escaped our knowledge, because we're talking about taxpayers in Egypt, and this is taxpayers in Palestine. And so the blue letters are the ones that I'm looking at, the fonts. This guy is on the side of a good scientific argument with evidence, and on the side of the Bible. Who are you trying to kid? You and I are looking at the same sources, no doubt, and there are huge, huge, huge gaps in the records. Immensely unlikely. You find a few local inscriptions and papyrus returns of taxpayers, and you say that's the norm. In AD 6, we do know that Augustus was enacting a new tax on inheritance to help pay for his armies. Well, the blue font says, by the way, the taxation to support his army is the main reason it is believed that Quirinius assisted in the taxing of 8 to 5 BC. As his extended military maneuvers on the Pisidian highlands dating from around 12 BC would have required additional financing. But this skeptic says, however, the tax affected only Roman citizens, not Jews of Nazareth, and there was no need for a worldwide census to register the names. Of course, where's the evidence for this? Now the blue font says, remember, the census in AD 6 is not the one of Luke 2:2. You're talking about two different apples and oranges. They're both fruit, but they're not the same. That's of 8 to 6 BC. But the census of AD 6 did hit the Jews pretty heavily. At least 600 talents as a nation, accumulated, according to Josephus in his Antiquities, cited in Jeremiah's Jerusalem in the times of Jesus, an investigation into the economic and social conditions during the New Testament period. So, as a national tax, it did affect the Jewish folk. You think things don't trickle down? Loads like this are always distributed to the people, in addition to the already oppressive tax structure of the Herods. And Luke does not place the worldwide census at the time of the AD 6 tax, but rather puts it sometime before the Syrian-based one in 7 to 5 BC. So apples and oranges again. This is what, when you get into an argument with people, stay close to the context. He says, well, it's similar over here in Egypt, but that's not necessarily proved. More accurately, Luke was probably not referring to a taxation census at all, simply a registration. Registrations were normally associated with 1. Taxation above discussion, 2. Military service, Jews were exempt, and 3. Special government, ballots. We have conclusive evidence that an empire-wide, in decree, not necessarily execution, of course, registration occurred in the time frame described by Luke. So we have that. So don't go to Egypt. Martin summarizes the literary, archaeological, and iconographic evidence for this. Now we're getting to evidence. Notice, I read these blue fonts comments, and they're all talking about evidence. The other one is going off to Egypt. The sixth reason for placing the nativity of Jesus in 3 or 2 BC is the coincidence of this date with the New Testament account that Jesus was born at the same time when a Roman census was being conducted. There went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the Roman world should be registered. Luke 2:1. Historians have not been able to find any empire-wide census or registration in the years 7 to 5 BC, but there is a reference to such a registration of all the Roman people not long before 5 February 2 BC, written by Caesar Augustus himself. Quote, While I was administering my 13th consulship, which is 2 BC, the Senate and the equestrian order and the entire Roman people gave me the title Father of my country. I'm giving you the articles where they find that. This award was given to Augustus on 5 February 2 BC. Therefore, the registration of citizen approval must have taken place in 3 BC. Orosius, in the 5th century, also said that Roman records of his time revealed that a census was indeed held when Augustus was made the first of men, an apt description of his award, Father of the country, at a time when all the great nations gave an oath of obedience to Augustus, 622 and 72. Orosius dated the census to 3 BC, and besides that, Josephus substantiates that an oath of obedience to Augustus was required in Judea not long before the death of Herod. So we've got these corroborations at these ancient documents. This agrees nicely in a chronological sense with what Luke records. But more than that, an inscription found in Paphlagonia, eastern Turkey, also dated to 3 BC, mentions an oath sworn by all the people in the land at the altars of Augustus, in the temples of Augustus in the various districts. And dovetailing precisely with this inscription, the early 5th century Armenian historian Moses of Khoren said the census brought Joseph and Mary to Bethlehem was conducted by Roman agents in Armenia, where they set up the image of Augustus Caesar in every temple. The similarity of this language is strikingly akin to the wording on the Paphlagonian inscription describing the oath taken in 3 BC. These inscriptions can allow us to reasonably conclude that the oath of Josephus, the Paphlagonian inscription, and Orosius, and the census mentioned by Luke, Orosius, and Moses of Khoren were one and the same. All of these things happened in 3 BC. Evidence. What this means is that we have very, very clear evidence of an empire-wide registration in the time frame required. And the blue says, how much more data do you need? Well, the skeptic goes on and on. In Judea, under Quirinius, we know from Josephus' histories of something more appropriate, not a worldwide decree, but a local census in AD 6, which assesses Judea when the province passed from rule by Herod's family to direct rule by Rome. It's, again, going elsewhere. Although the census was local, it caused a notorious outcry, not least because some of the Jews argued that the innovation was contrary to Scripture and the will of God. According to the third gospel, the census which took Joseph to Bethlehem, was the first while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And he's drawing that conclusion, but there's no evidence to that. And the blue letters say, I've already pointed out that the first while is probably a mistranslation of the text. Before is more in line with the Koine, original 1st century Common Greek idiom, so you have a reference to that. So he's already made his point, and guess what skeptics do? They go back and repeat the point that you just refuted. And then when you keep repeating the refutation, they go away. Quirinius, the census was indeed the first, but it belonged in AD 6 when King Herod, the story's other marker, was long since dead. So now he's making up stuff to show it's a contradiction. Well, if you speak contradictorily, then you're going to make a contradiction, but that's your editorialism. Okay, a couple of concluding points. That Augustus might have issued a worldwide census decree within the Roman Empire, a record of which is only preserved in Luke's Gospel, is altogether reasonable and plausible. The data about Augustus's propensity to count and tax is well known. For example, he documents in his own records how he counted the Roman nation some 3 times, and increasingly levied detailed taxes throughout his reign, with the attendant increase in bribery and vice. As vain as he was, it would not be surprising at all for this to have occurred. So that's within the character of Augustus. And you can't say this is the first, this middle, or the last, because that's not in the text anyway in the Bible. Luke didn't say that. It was also customary for the Roman Empire to take a census when there was a change of local government, e.g. when Archelaus was deposed in AD 6, one of Quirinius' first tasks was to liquidate his state and hold a census to determine the tribute load. The implication of this pattern for our discussion is that when Varus became governor of Syria in 7 BC, one of the first acts would have been to take a census, the one which would have produced the trip from Nazareth to Bethlehem for. We know another pinpoint, we know Augustus instituted a 14-year census cycle for Egypt in 10-9 BC. Not only does this give us more confirmation that Augustus was a counting sort of guy, technical, but it may reflect a local execution of a worldwide decree of Augustus. To assert that Augustus did not make such a decree is an affirmative historical statement, and the burden of proof for any historical assertion always rests with its author. He's saying, again, we're talking about evidence. You make these crazy things, well, this is logical that this is what would happen. Where's your proof? Where's your evidence? And to argue that Luke was wrong because there was no worldwide decree, because we don't have a record of this specific decree, is to make a common mistake in historical method, arguing from slim silence. Some slim arguments can be made to work, though, and hack it again. Evidence must always be affirmative. Negative evidence, we don't hear anything about it. Well, archaeological facts haven't been discovered yet, and then when you discover them, you're gone. And the negative evidence is a contradiction in terms. It is no evidence at all. The non-existence of an object, read worldwide decree, is established not by non-existent evidence, we can't find the decree so far, but by affirmative evidence of the fact that it did not or could not exist, a document that says it did happen and did not happen. So we have evidence that shows this could not have happened because of certain evidence you already have. But if there's no evidence, you can't say either way. Those are common arguments for people who are skeptics of the Bible. And in spite of the above methodological and background problems, we do have concrete evidence of an empire-wide Augustinian registration, literally, archaeological, iconographic, literary, archaeological, and iconographic evidence. To summarize this section on the missing census of 7 and 5 BC, I have affirmative evidence and good arguments for such a census. Luke, a very reliable historian, says so. Augustus was this type of person with repeated known actions along this line, which we've shown the evidence. These kinds of events occurred at major changes in ruling personnel, a situation that obtained in Palestine at the time Luke indicates. Parallel events occurred in other Roman-controlled areas in roughly the same time. There is not a scrap of contrary data. So if you don't have any data on the issue, then you have to be silent, and there's not a scrap of contrary data. QUIRINIUS' participation in such an event, along with Varus, is not only possible, but highly likely. And we have positive evidence of an empire-wide decree of Augustus within a year or two of the required date. Okay, so much for this subject. And actually, I could do some more research on the internet because this guy in the skeptic has decided to revise what he is saying because he didn't like the arguments before, so he's changed his arguments to find non-evidence, more non-evidence. But that's what the Christian is to do. When there's a question that comes up about the validity of something in the Bible, it's great. We find that the plausibility is fantastic versus the lack of evidence, since there's no evidence of the specific thing that Luke says in the terminology Luke used for the people that he said. That doesn't mean it never happened. You don't have evidence to the contrary. You have no evidence. All right, let's go back. So much for point 20. Now, let's take another look at something next time.